the Democratic Party effectively switched. It took up the Republican Party's business model, moving away from defending the interests of common people as its reason for gaining power. And that created a problem. So during the Clinton administration, we saw the end to aid with to families with dependent children. We saw NAFTA. We saw basically an abandonment of the core raison d'etre for the Democratic Party. Now, the Republican Party at that point was the party of business. But that doesn't really mean the party of business. What the Republican Party was the party of well-established large businesses, which frequently meant, as it was catering to their interests, that it was preventing small businesses from rising up that would threaten its constituents. Now, the Democrats took up this model. They went into influence peddling as well during the Clinton administration, and they became the party of other businesses. So now you have two parties that are basically dealing with competing business interests, vying for power. But what that does is it excludes the interests of regular folks. And so regular folks have been getting the shaft ever since. Nobody is representing their interests. They're getting wise to it, and they're feeling the effects on the street. They are feeling the system is rigged. It's rigged against them. It's not even evenly rigged against them. So, in black communities, there's the perception it's specifically rigged against us. And you know what? It is. But the way it is very subtle, right? It's not a matter of racism being ubiquitous, inside every white head. It's not like that. This has very little to do with modern racism. But what it has to do with is a property of our system. So, there's a cybernetic principle. The purpose of a system is what it does. It means that don't listen to what somebody says that the system is for. Look at what it accomplishes. That's what it's for. And our system basically has two things that it accomplishes. It basically keeps real change from happening. And the reason it keeps real change from happening is because people who are winning in the present system will continue to win if the system continues to do what it does, and they may lose if the system changes and starts doing something else. So it creates what I would argue is a kind of organic conservatism. Those with power don't want change because it threatens them. And the other thing that our system does is it reproduces present patterns of distribution into the future. And what that means is racism that has almost died out is still alive and well in a sense, because all you have to do is take people who are born into a neighborhood that is devoid of opportunity and continue that pattern. If no opportunity shows up, then people who were oppressed are now going to continue to be oppressed. And so it feels personal, but it isn't. It's just reproducing an existing pattern.
And a lot of that emanates from these communities that have been disenfranchised and economically distraught from slavery. Like literally from that, where we're dealing with the echoes of slavery, and it doesn't get addressed. And when people do bring it up and they start talking about reparations, people roll their eyes and people go, oh, that was so long ago. But the results of that are still alive today in the South. They're still alive today in many communities that were redlined as recently as the 1960s, right?
That's exactly right. And so we basically have set ourselves up for a confused response because there's a subtlety. The fact that ancient racism, people who are dead, their racism still haunts us today through mechanisms of the reproduction of patterns of distribution. And mind you, when people hear distribution, they freak out because they think you're talking about wealth. I'm not talking about wealth, and we can talk about why I wouldn't bother. But what we're talking about is opportunity. Opportunity has been hoarded. It has been concentrated in some zip codes and almost totally excluded from other zip codes. And so you're right. The patterns of slavery moved into Jim Crow, and now they've moved into a phase where they are very subtly infused into our system. And so it is causing people to have the sense that there is an enemy and it is out to get me, when it's not exactly an enemy that's out to get you. It's a pattern, right? It's a pattern that definitely needs to be addressed. And so the natural place would have been the Democratic Party. But the Democratic Party, because it has taken up with big business, is not going to do it, even though it would be a winning political strategy. The Democratic Party is more interested in serving the economic interests of its actual constituents than it is serving the interests of its nominal constituents. And so Why are you seeing something that looks like a communist revolution beginning in the streets? For the natural reason, which is that people are feeling excluded from their share, and they are being excluded. But this revolution that is beginning in our streets is no more coherent or desirable than Maoism, and it's going to be brutal in the Maoist way, or possibly the way that it unfolded in the French Revolution, or maybe it'll be some unique version and it'll get its own name. But if we want the Republic to survive, we're going to have to prevent this from happening. And because it's a leaderless movement, who do you even talk to? Who do you reason with?